MTC. Unit 20, 2, No Analysis. A rich merchant lived alone in his house. Knowing that he was the only person living in the house, he was always prepared in case thieves came to his house. So, one day, when a thief entered his home, he remained calm and cool. Although he was awake, the merchant pretended to be in a deep sleep. He lay in bed and watched the thief in action. The thief had brought a new white sheet with him to carry away the stolen goods. He spread it out on the floor with the idea of putting all the stolen valuables into it, tying it, and carrying it away. While he was busy gathering expensive-looking items from the merchant's luxurious house, the merchant quickly got out of the bed. Then he replaced the new white sheet with a similar-looking white sheet, which was much weaker and much cheaper than the thief's one. He then lay down and pretended to be asleep. When the thief had finished collecting as many valuables as he could, he hurriedly tied a knot in the white sheet which he thought was his. The merchant meanwhile ran out into the garden and yelled, "Thief! Thief!" with all the air in his lungs. The thief got nervous and quickly lifted the sheet. To his surprise, the thin white sheet, filled with stolen goods, was torn apart. All the stolen goods fell down on the floor, creating a very loud and unpleasant noise. Seeing many people run towards him, the thief had to give up on all of the stolen goods. Leaving the goods behind in the house, he ran away in a hurry, saying under his breath, "This man is such a skillful merchant, he is a businessman to the core. He has not only managed to save his valuables but has also taken away my new sheet. He has stolen from a thief." As he said that to himself, he ran away from the house. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No 0103. When I was 17, I discovered a wonderful thing. 17. My father and I were sitting on the floor of his study. We were organizing his old papers. Across the carpet I saw a fat paper clip. Its rust dusted the cover sheet of a report of some kind. I picked it up. I started to read. Then I started to cry. It was a speech he had written in 1920, in Tennessee. 1920 Tennessee. Then only 17 himself and graduating from high school, he had called for equality for African Americans. 17. I marveled, proud of him, and wondered how, in 1920, so young, so white, and in the deep South, where the law still separated black from white, he had had the courage to deliver it. 1920. I asked him about it. "Daddy," I said, handing him the pages, "this speech, how did you ever get permission to give it? And weren't you scared?" "Well, honey," he said, "I didn't ask for permission. I just asked myself, what is the most important challenge facing my generation? I knew immediately. Then I asked myself, and if I weren't afraid, what would I say about it in this speech? I wrote it. And I delivered it. About halfway through I looked out to see the entire audience of teachers, students, and parents stand up and walk out. Left alone on the stage, I thought to myself, well, I guess I need to be sure to do only two things with my life. Keep thinking for myself, and not get killed. He handed the speech back to me, and smiled. "You seem to have done both," I said. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No 0406. Once upon a time, there lived a young king who had a great passion for hunting. His kingdom was located at the foot of the Himalayas. Once every year, he would go hunting in the nearby forests. He would make all the necessary preparations, and then set out for his hunting trip. Like all other years, the hunting season had arrived. Preparations began in the palace and the king got ready for his hunting trip. Deep in the forest, he spotted a beautiful wild deer. It was a large stag. His aim was perfect. When he killed the deer with just one shot of his arrow, the king was filled with pride. The proud hunter ordered a hunting drum to be made out of the skin of the deer. Seasons changed. A year passed by. 1. And it was time to go hunting once again. The king went to the same forest as the previous year. He used his beautiful deerskin drum to round up animals. But none came. All the animals ran for safety, except one doe. She came closer and closer to the drummer. Suddenly, she started fearlessly licking the deerskin drum. The king was surprised by this sight. An old servant had an answer to this strange behavior. The deerskin used to make this drum belonged to her mate, the deer who we hunted last year. This doe is mourning the death of her mate, the man said. Upon hearing this, the king had a change of heart. He had never realized that an animal, too, felt the pain of loss. He made a promise, from that day on, to never again hunt wild animals. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No 0709. James Walker was a renowned wrestler and he made his living through wrestling. James Walker. In his town, there was a tradition in which the leader of the town chose a day when James demonstrated his skills. James. The leader announced one day that James would exhibit his skills as a wrestler and asked the people if there was anyone to challenge him for the prize money. James, James. Everyone was looking around in the crowd when an old man stood up and said with a shaking voice, "I will enter the contest against him." James. Everyone burst out laughing thinking that it was a joke. James would crush him in a minute. James. According to the law, the leader could not stop someone who of his own free will entered the competition, so he allowed the old man to challenge the wrestler. When James saw the old man, he was speechless. James. Like everyone else, he thought that the old man had a death wish. The old man asked James to come closer since he wanted to say something to him. James. James moved closer and the old man whispered, "I know it is impossible for me to win, but my children are starving at home. James. Can you lose this competition to me so I can feed them with the prize money?" James thought he had an excellent opportunity to help a man in distress. James. He did a couple of moves so that no one would suspect that the competition was fixed. James. However, he did not use his full strength and allowed the old man to win. The old man was overjoyed when he received the prize money. That night James felt the most victorious he had ever felt. James. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No 1012. A merchant in a small town had identical twin sons. The boys worked for their father in the store he owned, and when he died, they took over the store. Everything went well until the day a $20 bill disappeared. 20. One of the brothers had left the bill on the counter and walked outside with a friend. When he returned, the money was gone. He asked his older brother, "Did you see that $20 bill on the counter?" 20. His older brother replied that he had not. But the young man kept questioning him. $20 bills just don't get up and walk away. Surely you must have seen it. 20. There was subtle accusation in his voice. Anger began to rise. Hatred set in. Before long, bitterness divided the twins. They refused to speak. They finally decided they could no longer work together, and a dividing wall was built down the center of the store. For 20 years the hostility grew, spreading to their families and the community. 20. Then one day a man from another state stopped by the store. He walked in and asked the younger brother, "How long have you been here?" He replied that he'd been there all his life. The customer said, 20 years ago I came into this town in a boxcar. 20. I hadn't eaten for 3 days. 3. I came into this store and saw a $20 bill on the counter. 20. I put it in my pocket and walked out. All these years I haven't been able to forgive myself. So I had to come back to return it. The customer was amazed to see tears well up in the eyes of the man. Would you please go next door and tell that same story to the man in the store? The younger brother said. Then the customer was even more amazed to see the two middle-aged men hugging each other and weeping together in the front of the store. After 20 years, the brokenness was repaired. 2-0. The wall of anger that divided them came down. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No 13-15. Grandma, asked Amy, are angels real? Amy. Some people say so, said grandmother. Amy told grandmother that she had seen them in pictures. Amy. But she also wanted to know if her grandmother had ever actually seen an angel. Her grandmother said she had, but they looked different than in pictures. Then, I am going to find one, said Amy. Amy. That's good. But I will go with you, because you're too little, said grandmother. Amy complained, but you walk so slowly. Amy. I can walk faster than you think. Grandmother replied, with a smile. So they started, Amy leaping and running. Amy. Then, she saw a horse coming towards them. On the horse sat a wonderful lady. When Amy saw her, the woman sparkled with jewels and gold, and her eyes were brighter than diamonds. Amy. Are you an angel? Asked Amy. Amy. The lady gave no reply, but stared coldly at her, leaving without saying a word. That was not an angel, said Amy. Amy. No, indeed, said grandmother. So Amy walked ahead again. Amy. Then, she met a beautiful woman who wore a dress as white as snow. You must be an angel, cried Amy. Amy. You dear little girl, do I really look like an angel? She asked. You are an angel, replied Amy. Amy. But suddenly the woman's face changed when Amy stepped on her dress by mistake. Amy. Go away, and go back to your home, she shouted. As Amy stepped back from the woman, she stumbled and fell. Amy. She lay in the dusty road and sobbed. I am tired. Will you take me home, Grandma? She asked. Sure. That is what I came for. Grandmother said in a warm voice. They started to walk along the road. Suddenly Amy looked up and said, Grandma, you are not an angel, are you? Oh, honey, said grandmother, I'm not an angel. Well, Grandma, you are an angel to me because you always stay by my side, said Amy. Amy. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No 16-18. Dorothy was home alone. Dorothy. She was busy with a school project, and suddenly wanted to eat French fries. She peeled 2 potatoes, sliced them up and put a pot with cooking oil on the stove. Then the telephone rang. It was her best friend Samantha. Samantha. While chatting away on the phone, Dorothy noticed a strange light shining from the kitchen, and then she remembered about the pot of oil on the stove. Dorothy. Dorothy dropped the phone and rushed to the kitchen. Dorothy. The oil was on fire. Chill. Take a deep breath, she said to herself. What did they teach us not to do in a situation like this? Don't try to put it out by throwing water on it, because it will cause an explosion, she remembered. She picked up the pot's lid and covered the pot with it to put out the flames. In the process she burned her hands. Dorothy felt dizzy and sat down at the kitchen table. Dorothy. A couple of minutes later, her parents came rushing into the house. Samantha had suspected that something might be wrong after Dorothy dropped the phone just like that, and she had phoned Dorothy's parents. Samantha Dorothy. Dorothy started to cry. Dorothy. Her mother hugged her tightly and looked at the wound. Tell me what happened, she said. Dorothy told her, sobbing and sniffing. Dorothy. Aren't you going to yell at me? She asked them through the tears. Her father answered with a smile, I also put my lid on to keep me from exploding. Dorothy looked at him, relieved. Dorothy. But be careful not to be so irresponsible again. A while later, after the wound had been treated, the family sat around the kitchen table and talked. I learned a big lesson today, Dorothy said. Dorothy. Her parents expected her to say something about the fire. But she talked about something different. I have decided to use kind words more just like you. Her parents were very grateful, because Dorothy had quite a temper. Dorothy. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No 1921. A long time ago, a farmer in a small town had a neighbor who was a hunter. The hunter owned a few fierce and poorly trained hunting dogs. They jumped the fence frequently and chased the farmer's lambs. The farmer asked his neighbor to keep his dogs in check, but his words fell on deaf ears. One day when the dogs jumped the fence, they attacked and severely injured several of the lambs. The farmer had had enough by this point. He went to the nearest city to consult a judge. After listening carefully to his story, the judge said, I could punish the hunter and instruct him to keep his dogs chained or lock them up. But you would lose a friend and gain an enemy. Which would you rather have for a neighbor, a friend or an enemy? The farmer replied that he preferred a friend. All right, I will offer you a solution that keeps your lambs safe and will also turn your neighbor into a good friend. Having heard the judge's solution, the farmer agreed. As soon as the farmer reached home, he immediately put the judge's suggestions to the test. He selected 3 of the cutest lambs from his farm. He then presented them to his neighbor's 3 small sons. The children accepted with joy and began to play with them. To protect his son's newly acquired playmates, the hunter built a strong doghouse for his dogs. The dogs never bothered the farmer's lambs again. Out of gratitude for the farmer's generosity toward his children, the hunter often invited the farmer for feasts. In turn, the farmer offered him lamb meat and cheese he had made. The farmer quickly developed a strong friendship with him. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No 2224. 2 students met their teacher at the start of a track through a forest. He gave them instructions to follow the path to its end, in preparation for a test later in the week. The path split into 2, one was clear and smooth, the other had fallen logs and other obstacles in the way. One student chose to avoid the obstacles, taking the easier path to the end. He felt clever as he ran without stopping. The second student chose to tackle the obstacles, battling through every challenge in his path. The student who chose the easy path finished first and felt proud of himself. I'm glad I chose to avoid the rocks and logs. They were only there to slow me down, he thought to himself. The second student arrived at the finish feeling tired and regretting the path he had chosen. The teacher smiled at them both. He requested that they join him at a specific location in 3 days. When they arrived, they could see a ravine that was a few meters wide. The students looked at their teacher and he said just one word. Jump. The first student looked at the distance and his heart sank. The teacher looked at him. What's wrong? This is the leap to greatness. Everything that you've done until now should have prepared you for this moment. The student shrugged his shoulders and walked away, knowing he hadn't prepared adequately for greatness. The second student looked at the teacher and smiled. He knew now that the obstacles that had been placed in his path were part of his preparation. By choosing to overcome challenges, not avoid them, he was ready to make the leap. He ran as fast as he could and launched himself into the air. He made it across. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No 25-27. Kevin was in front of the mall wiping off his car. Kevin. He had just come from the car wash and was waiting for his wife. An old man whom society would consider a beggar was coming toward him from across the parking lot. From the looks of him, he seemed to have no home and no money. There are times when you feel generous, but there are other times when you just don't want to be bothered. This was one of those don't want to be bothered times. I hope the old man doesn't ask me for any money, Kevin thought. Kevin. He didn't. He came and sat on the bench in front of the bus stop, but he didn't look like he could have enough money to even ride the bus. After a few minutes he spoke. That's a very pretty car, he said. He was ragged, but he had an air of dignity around him. Kevin said, thanks, and continued wiping off his car. Kevin. He sat there quietly as Kevin worked. Kevin. The expected request for money never came. As the silence between them widened, Kevin asked, "Do you need any help?" Kevin. He answered in 3 simple but profound words that Kevin shall never forget. Kevin. Don't we all? Kevin was feeling successful and important until those 3 words hit him. Kevin. Don't we all? Kevin also needed help. Kevin. Maybe not for bus fare or a place to sleep, but he needed help. He opened his wallet. And Kevin gave him not only enough for bus fare, but enough to get a warm meal. Kevin. No matter how much you have, no matter how much you have accomplished, you need help too. No matter how little you have, no matter how loaded you are with problems, even without money or a place to sleep, you can give help. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No 28-30. Feeling a tap on his shoulder while giving away food and supplies to people, 18-year-old Toby Long turned around to find an Ethiopian boy standing behind him. Toby Long. The young boy looked first at his own worn shirt, then at Toby's clothes. Toby. Next, he asked if he could have Toby's shirt. Toby. Toby had traveled to Africa to volunteer for 2.5 weeks with an international charity. Toby too. Toby didn't know what to say to the little boy other than, "I need it, too." Toby. When Toby returned to camp that evening, he couldn't stop thinking about the little boy with the big sad eyes. Toby. Hunger wasn't the only problem in this area where poverty was everywhere. Most people had only 1 or 2 ragged pieces of clothing. Thinking of the boy and his own refusal to give him his shirt, Toby cried about the decision he'd made. Toby. But not for long, Toby vowed not to forget the boy he had refused to give his shirt to. Toby. When Toby returned home to Michigan, he tried to keep his promise to make a difference in the lives of the people he had seen. He organized a t-shirt drive in his community. Toby, Michigan. Called "Give the Shirt Off Your Back," Toby's campaign soon collected over 10,000 t-shirts. Give the shirt off your back, Toby. His next challenge was as great or even greater than the t-shirts. It was to find an organization to pay the shipping costs for getting all those shirts to Ethiopia. It was as difficult as the first challenge, too. He found SOS, Supporters of Sub-Saharan Africa. SOS. The organization agreed to transport the t-shirts on their next trip to Africa. "I think we can all make a difference," said Toby. "I wonder if that little boy I met will get one of the 10,000 shirts, and I don't know the answer. But I can pray that he does, or that someone who receives one will give it to him." Toby. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No 31-33. Ranjan opened his cycle shop early in the morning. Ranjan. Yesterday he could not attend to business as he was laid up with high fever, but today he made it up to the shop to earn money for his family. Shouting to the tea boy in the next shop for a strong cup of tea, he lined up all the bicycles to be repaired outside. Ranjan. He took a sip of the tea, thinking about the order in which he had to go ahead with his job. Ranjan's thoughts were disturbed by an old man walking with his bicycle towards his shop. Ranjan. The old man was wearing an old turban on his head. His hands and face were covered in wrinkles. In a gloomy tone, he said, "Would you please replace the tire? I'll pay you this evening." The old man? Feeling sympathy for him, Ranjan fixed the bicycle. Ranjan. He even treated the old man to a cup of tea. The old man thanked Ranjan and left. Ranjan. Ranjan worked hard to finish what he had to do. Ranjan. It was already late evening but there was no sign of the old man. Doubts filled him. Ranjan. What if the old man does not return with the money? He regretted fixing up the old man's bicycle. Suddenly he lost all hope and he could wait no longer. Ranjan. He locked up his shop later than usual and cursed himself for getting tricked by an old man. At home, Ranjan was confused. Ranjan. Washing his greasy hands, he heard a knock at his door. It was the old man and the tea boy. The old man said, "Your shop was closed when I returned. Luckily, I saw this boy in front of the shop." Handing over the money to Ranjan, he continued, "Thanks for your hospitality." Ranjan. Ranjan grinned at the kind words the old man spoke to him. Ranjan. The fact that he had suspected the old man pained his heart. MTC. Good job. Let's start. MTC. Unit 20, 2, No 3436. A 10-year-old boy decided to learn judo despite the fact that he had lost his left arm in a devastating car accident. The boy began lessons with an old Japanese judo master. The boy was doing well, so he couldn't understand why, after 3 months of training, the master had taught him only one move. 3. Not quite understanding but believing in his master, the boy kept training. Several months later, the master took the boy to his first tournament. Surprising himself, the boy easily won his first 2 matches. The third match proved to be more difficult, but after some time, his opponent became impatient and charged. The boy skillfully used his one move to win the match. Still amazed by his success, he was now in the finals. This time, his opponent was bigger, stronger, and more experienced. Concerned that he might get hurt, the referee called a timeout to stop the match. Then the master intervened. "No," the master insisted, "let him continue." Soon after the match resumed, his opponent made a critical mistake. He dropped his guard. Instantly, the boy used his move to pin him. The boy had won the match and the tournament. He was the champion. On the way home, after reviewing all the matches he had, he summoned the courage to ask what was on his mind. "Master, how did I become the champion with only one move?" "You won for 2 reasons, the master answered. First, you've mastered one of the most difficult throws in all of judo. And second, the only known defense for that move is for your opponent to grab your left arm. The boy's biggest weakness had become his biggest strength.